we have microphones for the live stream, just not for the. Okay. Well, but we need to be like in front of the room. Yeah, maybe you can call it the rules. I don't know the rest.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming to our pre-concert discussion with Miriam, director and founder LIVSHI. Our pre-concert discussions are generously supported by Morgenstern's books, and we are very grateful to them for their very impressive efforts across the Cincinnati community. We are really thrilled to be a part of that effort. So we have with us Devin Nelson, adjunct assistant professor of music in the musicology. A little, where am I? And we are really, really thrilled to have her. Since leaving IU 10 years back or so, LIVSHI has established herself as an acclaimed specialist in historical performance and has sung with numerous high-caliber early music ensembles across the U.S. Royal soloist in the D.C. area.
Thank you, Suzanne. So, Alicia, your group, Miriam, writes that many of your programs bring well-loved composers like Monteverdi and Schutz to Jewish spaces and other houses of faith, celebrating the Jewish roots in their compositions.
A little slower and a little louder.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And providing space for interreligious dialogue. And tonight's program is titled LIVSHI Oz. I was wondering if you could connect that throughout the program. Those values come up, especially
Sure.
with Jacqueline.
Sure, thank you for that question. So tonight's program is titled LIVSHI Oz, which means, and it's actually from a line of Isaiah. And the reason that we're connecting it to this program tonight is that Miriam did another program about the biblical character of Esther in 2019. And that particular opera the particular oratorio has a really fast. So it was originally, the libretto was a translation, paraphrase, and recreation of sorts of Handel's. Great. A little slower? Sure. We need to talk right into these mics for the live stream, but I'll try to speak a little more slowly. Thank you. That we performed was a paraphrase in Hebrew of Handel's original libretto. And in addition and beyond just being a translation, it took on an entirely new character with the Hebrew text. It's rich with biblical allusions. And in that libretto, Mordecai says to Esther, "LIVSHI Oz, clothe yourself in strength," as she is about to risk her life to undertake this task, to put herself in peril to save the Jewish people. And this text echoes back to Isaiah, who in the original text is using it, "clothe yourself in strength." And he is speaking of the pain of exile here, and that has a powerful resonance with Esther, who has taken on has been an important character for many Jewish communities throughout history, who view her as the ultimate Jew in exile who did clothe herself in strength. And Jews in countless communities, a different telling of the Esther story, and it seemed appropriate to borrow that phrase, "LIVSHI Oz, clothe yourself in strength." And I find that these two words are particularly useful for this tragic week that we have had as a country, where we all need to clothe ourselves in strength and to be together, to seek comfort and inspiration from our powerful that in hearing these stories tonight with Esther and Judith, that we will all draw some strength and leave.
You were mentioning all of these settings of Esther and of many of the stories and texts on this program. I was wondering if we might think of tonight's music and even the performance in a very long tradition of commentary on Esther in Midrash, in the Talmud, in medieval commentaries by Rashi and others. So what might we say as music, as musical commentary? What does it add to our understanding of the texts and of these stories? And maybe how does your performance add a sort of commentary on the commentary, which is a big part of tradition as well?
So I love that question about layers of commentary, because Jewish tradition the way back to the Mishnah and the Gemara, the original ancient sages who were looking to explain sometimes gaps in the Torah, where they would say, what does this mean here? There's something that doesn't add up, or we are removed from this time and our lives are different now. So how can we make sense of this ancient text in a way that is relevant to our lives? And we see this in every generation. And what's so beautiful is that we can go back to the generations before us and see how they did us still. And then, of course, we're living in a completely different context, so our job is to figure out how to reinterpret. But we have these guides of the sages that came before us to help us do that work. And so I love Devin's question about how does music become commentary? And it's been really interesting to think about that because, of course, when a librettist chooses to tell this story, they are making their own commentary.
Especially with translation.
Especially, right. In the original text, we often don't hear about the inner life, the inner lives of these people that we're hearing about. We hear the events of the stories, and they're very compelling, but we don't know what they were thinking and feeling for the most part. And then also, we miss some of the drama in between. So the libretti for these two cantatas you'll hear tonight give us a lot of that. It is action-packed, it is full of suspense, and you feel like you're right there in the action. And then we also hear about how these characters were feeling, about they're trembling, they don't know what to do, they're looking for encouragement, for sustenance. And those, of course, are all choices that the librettist made. And then when the composer chooses to set those words to music, she, of course, is choosing how do I interpret what the librettist wrote, and how do I heighten my interpretation of this through the music. So I think that's what makes these cantatas so powerful, is that you can really, you feel like you're right in the moment, in the characters' minds, and you almost feel as if you are seeing the action happen. It's so richly written.
Characters' emotion and affect really ties into the time period that this was written, right? In the 17th century, a focus on affect. Are there any particular moments that you think we should listen to for that effective character?
There are so many, but in the first cantata you'll hear Judith. Jacques de la Guerre is narrating Judith's process of her fear and her resolve, and there is a rather lengthy instrumental telling of the events that happen in the story of her beheading Holofernes. You will hear her raising her arm to strike, and you will hear some very vicious movements in the continuo. You hear the head rolling. It's incredibly graphic, so listen out for that. That's probably the number one example I can point out.
We may not have staging, but we can hear it. Excellent. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the last piece on the program, which of course is by you. So it's fantastic to have you as a composer here as well as performer. So you discuss your compositional process in your program notes, which you can find in the handout for today. And you say that you originally started this as a two-part melody, and you were sort of adding to it each week as sort of almost like a returning process that you're building on each week. How do you, in thinking of this as sort of a tradition of you're coming back to it each week, almost like a meditation on the same text, how do you see yourself in larger traditions of music making, in traditions of music history, of Jewish music, and of female musicians, our theme for this year's festival?
Yeah, thank you. So the process of writing, it was so emotional in the middle of the pandemic to spend a little time every day, and it's full of the possibility of redemption and beauty as well. But it is a painful text because it's about that you are longing for connection, which I think is something that everybody has felt at one point or another, and perhaps even more so during these past few years. So that was on my mind as I was coming back to this text as a meditation each time I returned to it. And to answer your question about how the process fits in with Jewish history and Jewish music and women in music, I think the mission of Miriam and of this group, as I've been thinking about that question, really shows us that throughout Jewish history, we have lived in every corner of the world, and we have learned how to make our homes in new places. And every time we've done that, we live with our friends and our neighbors. And in that way, the Jewish communities around the world have become richer and stronger because we've adapted and learned, and because of the people we have lived with and learned from. And so, as a Jewish musician myself, who is steeped in Baroque music, in classical music, in early music, and also as a Jewish musician. And I've come to the realization that this is the story, right or wrong way to be a Jewish person or a Jewish musician. The music that we are performing tonight is in a musical language that I'm sure many of us hold very near since we are here at this festival. Baroque music, we love it. It calls to us on a very deep level. It evokes strong emotions. It is transcendent. It helps us find calm. It makes us excited. And for me, the ability to connect that with my identity as a Jewish musician is part of the story of the Jewish community and our resilience. And being able to tell Jewish stories through this musical lens is so powerful for me, and being able to share that with you tonight.
Thank you. One more quick question. You chose the text Yedi Dafish. What really struck you about this one? Why did you come back to this one so often?
I got really stuck on this one text. One of the reasons is it's just very long. It has a lot of stanzas, and so I would do a line or two a day, and then I would stop because it was really, really emotional, and that was all I could handle for each day. And I do think I came to this text because it really helped me find an outlet for the difficulties that I was feeling during the pandemic, of feeling sick, of feeling uncertainty, and that text just was calling to me powerfully. One of the inner stanzas contains words that have become part of the Jewish prayer for healing, Misha Berach, and the words are Ana Elna Rafana La, and those come all the way back from the Torah when Moses' sister Miriam was stricken with an illness, and he cried out, Ana Elna Rafana La, please God heal her. And so this piece became also a prayer for healing for all the ills that were plaguing our country during this time. And
very relatable. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing your work.
Thank you, Devin.